it's Amber. I want to wish you a happy Halloween. I hope you're all having a ghoulish day today. So recently I taught an art class on how to a bunch of children on how to draw a pumpkin patch. It went very well. They had fun, I had fun. It was a good experience for everyone involved. It was a very safe experience as well. Masks were mandatory, as they should be. And during this pandemic, it went very well. So well, in fact, that I thought I'd share my knowledge with you. That now, so I'd already recorded everything. So, this is what happened no matter what. I hope you enjoy this video. But without further ado, why don't we get to it?
So to start off, I used a yellow colored pencil, and I know it's hard to see, but I used the yellow because I didn't want it to show up too much when everything was done. I wanted it to start off light and then get darker. And like I said, I just made my preliminary sketching, figured out where I wanted the trees, the background, the foreground, the pumpkins, the cats, all of that. After finishing my preliminary sketch, I took colored pencils that I knew I would be using in the future, such as an orange, a green, and a brown. I used these colors to sort of color coordinate and figure out where I wanted my markers to go in the future, as well as what colors I was going to use. It just made things a lot easier. Of course, as with most drawings that I make where I'm not too familiar with the subject matter, I did use reference photos to figure out how to make pumpkins, and in general just make a whole pumpkin patch, and figure out the leaves, and like draw the cats. I was constantly looking at pictures of cats so I could get them semi-realistic. Making this drawing wasn't that difficult, surprisingly. A lot of it was just circles and more tube things. Most everybody knows how to draw a basic cat. I mean, not the most realistic cat, but a cat-like creature, and people know how to draw trees. Pumpkins are just circles, of course. It was actually fairly good. I mean, I used a lot more tube shapes. Like, I wanted this one pumpkin in the front to have its stem sort of coming out, and looking at the photos, I realized, it vines. The vine of the pumpkin sort of wraps. It was just getting basic shapes down that you had to do, and finding like little circles where it's again where the vine goes and attaches, and they all have like a little bit of a butt on another side, and we see pumpkins standing up when they're in a pumpkin patch. They're not really sitting up, they're kind of laying on their sides. At least that's what I gathered from the photos I was looking at. So this cat was probably the hardest to draw because I wanted it to look like it was yawning, but I also went on top of the pumpkin. The cats, for the most part, were really easy. I did want their shapes down, but most of the line work that went into them wasn't very visible in the end because they're meant to be black cats to sort of go in this little pumpkin patch to give it a little spoopy feeling. But I wanted to just sort of have, like, I got the one cat who's more thinner fur, I got another cat who's got more thicker fur, because not all cats are the same. One thing you can see I'm doing is I'm making a bunch of circles in the background. This is sort of give the illusion of depth in this drawing. I have larger pumpkins in the front, and then as it goes further back towards my horizon line, I made the pumpkins much smaller. And like I said, it just gives a bit of depth and feel to it, as though you are looking at this big pumpkin in front of you, and then you've got all these smaller ones in the distance. I used the same technique with the vines and leaves as well as the cats. As you can see, the cat on the right is slightly bigger than the cat on the left. And once my tiny little cat in the background shows up, you'll see it looks much smaller and much further back. So far back that all you actually see of it is its figure, its shape, and its eye, and its yellow eye. After solidifying my pumpkins, I went and started drawing the trees. I wanted these trees to be kind of scraggly and not have any leaves on them because it is fall and most of the leaves are gone. Oh, I mean, there's like almost no leaves here because it's winter already, happening because of all the snow on the ground. So in order to get that whole scraggly look, what I did is I made them get kind of smaller the further up they went. I also made sure to keep them rather small, but still rather big, so that we could see that it was in the distance. I also put a little creepy face in one of the trees, because I felt like it was very thick and needed it. And here's where I'm putting in my tiny little kitty cat. I also put a little crescent moon to signify that it is nighttime. Going in with the actual colors, I started out with markers, and I used primarily a yellow marker on the ground, specifically on the pumpkins, the leaves, and the vines, as well as the moon and the eyes of the cats, of course. This was to just make sure I had highlights, and it also made it a lot easier when I went in with colored pencils, because there's a lot less white space on these parts of the drawing. And it, like I said, it made some really cool highlights once I added the colored pencil. Like with the pumpkins, I used a marker for the cats, but this time using a black marker, making sure to avoid the eyes and the nose, anything that I didn't want to be black. I wasn't afraid about the bodies because I would go in and define the little bits, like the little features later on with the pencils. I then went on to add a pink to the noses and a brown to the trees. In coloring the trees, I tried to keep my motions going up and down. This helped in the fact that I don't use Copics. I just had a normal Crayola marker. And sometimes it can overlap and you get this sort of streakiness. But I use that to my advantage by, like I said, just going up and down and following the motion of the branches. And it actually made somewhat of a bark look. This was defined later on when I added colored pencils. After finishing the trees, I then went on to color the sky with a purple marker. This was so I could make the sky look darker, but not totally black. When coloring the sky, I did much of the same techniques as what I did with the trees. I just used a up and down motion, but I turned the paper on its side so that it would look as though I was going side to side instead. You can see that I'm also using the marker as sort of making a thicker outline around everything that's already been colored, or spots that are not the sky. This was in order to help me when I was moving my hand back and forth. It helped me to sort of have a guard, so that if my hand went a little too far, I wasn't really going to hit that tree or the moon and mess everything else up. After finishing with the markers, I moved back to the colored pencils and started putting in all the final little details. So starting with the pumpkins on the far left, I just went in with my orange pencil, my orange, green, and brown pencils, and started just redefining things. When coloring the pumpkins, I found it best to go from those little circles, or where the vine is supposed to come from, and just start almost doing a sun ray kind of thing, or a firework, just making it burst out from that area. I constantly turned my page in order to get that. And this sort of, I kept it streaky on purpose, and this helped me to create little highlights without even trying, because I just went with quick motions, nice and easy. Only time I went in and made it darker was when I was adding in the shading, like under the cat or towards the bottom of the pumpkin. And I found this really worked in order to get everything. And then when I did the vines, especially like the root of the pumpkin, I sort of just did this twisting motion. I think I mentioned it earlier, and it helped when I did that with my brown and my greens, because if you look at a pumpkin, the kind of the handle on it gets really hard and it starts to turn brown. And I don't know if that's how, it's ripe or whatnot, but I just tried to do that, make a nice little transition from brown to green, green to brown. When coloring the leaves, I just tried to stay with the flow of it, making just motions. I didn't want them to look pure green. I want them to keep that sort of yellow look to it. And it just helped give a little bit more color. And only time I went in there harder with the pencil was in order to give more defining shape or shading. It really helped for all of these. And I just continued this throughout the rest of the pumpkins and vines. Quick, when it came to the butt of the pumpkin, I sort of was doing like a spotting motion. I kept that as yellow as I could, but I added little spots or circular motions in there to sort of make it look like it had dotting happening. It's something I noticed when looking at pumpkins, at least their bottoms, that's what they have, something similar. So in order to get the dirt underneath of the pumpkins, the ground and all that, I just went in with a brown, and I just sort of went and did this again, that's up and down motion that I had used previously. I wasn't afraid if anything was streaky and whatnot. I wanted it to be streaky because I wanted it to look as though it was in this muck or just dirt, and I was gonna go in, and later on I did go in with a yellow and a green and just doing the same exact thing that I'm doing here with this brown, and just sort of I layered it all. It helped to just sort of give the feeling of dirt and grass and vines and muck, just whatever it is you need for your pumpkins to grow. And I think it worked. And like I said, though, I did turn the page, like I did with the sky, in order to make it look as though it was horizontal with the actual drawing instead of vertical. But it was easier to turn the picture vertical in order to make the motions. But man, was this killer on my wrist. After finishing the ground, I went back to the trees using a brown pencil. As I mentioned earlier, I went up and down trying to get this sort of bark look, just redefining what was already there, giving a little shading where necessary, but mainly just doing this streaky motion so it wasn't so white, but it also had all that brown, and it looked barky, and it looked darker than it was when I had put the marker on there. Then I moved on to the cats. Though they are black, you can still kind of see their little details and their little body parts. I wanted to take that black and just make some shading on there like I did with everything else, but also add a bit of a fur texture to them where possible, especially on that fluffy cat. And I also took that black into the sky, and I did the exact same thing I did with the marker. I flipped the picture vertically, and I just went up and down, making with just a wide swoops, to sort of darken that purple sky and make it more of a black, but not a pure black. And with that, the drawing was complete.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that maybe you learned something today. And if you made it, and if you followed along with this video and made a drawing of your own, I'd love to see it. Feel free to tag me on Tumblr, Facebook, or Twitter. Handles will be on the screen. Links will be in the description. Don't forget, you can also find me on Ko-fi, where I do have commissions open. And as always, you'll be able to find some videos here. My last video, as well as something YouTube thinks is perfect for you. I hope you guys were able to understand me in this video. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have worn the teeth, but I like them. I also hope you guys have a great weekend. Stay spoopy and stay safe. Bye-bye.